I wasn't looking for giants when I started this investigation. I was researching architectural anomalies. Doorways too tall, staircases too grand, furniture scaled beyond human proportion. Standard historical curiosities, the kind of thing you file away as decorative, excess, or ceremonial design and move on. But then I found the photographs. Not paintings, not myths, not folklore passed down through generations of embellishment. Photographs. Actual photographic evidence from the mid to late 1800s, showing human beings of impossible scale standing next to regular-sized people. Their proportions so dramatic they seemed like composites, except they weren't composites. The grain matched, the lighting matched, the shadows fell correctly. These images predated the technology to fake them convincingly, and that's when the official explanations began to collapse. The deeper I went, the more photographs I uncovered. Card to visit from the 1,860 seconds. Cabinet cards from the 1,870 seconds. Tintype images showing men and occasionally women standing 8, sometimes 10 feet tall. Not circus performers advertised as such. Not showmen with documented names and traveling routes. Just people. Individuals photographed in formal settings wearing period-appropriate clothing, sometimes surrounded by family, members of normal height. The British Museum archives contain several. The Smithsonian mentions them in passing, then dismisses them as medical anomalies without further investigation. French collections show similar images cataloged and filed away. Russian imperial records reference persons of unusual stature serving in ceremonial roles. Always the same pattern. Acknowledge, categorize, move on. Never investigate, never ask why. Why were there so many? Why do the photographs cluster in specific decades, primarily between 1,850 and 1,900, then suddenly disappear? Why do contemporary accounts describe these individuals not as freaks or oddities, but as normal members of society, holding positions of authority, working as guards, overseers, foremen of construction, projects? And here's the strangest part. Many of these photographs show the giants standing in front of buildings, massive buildings. Buildings with doorways that seem absurdly oversized for normal humans, but perfectly proportioned for the individuals pictured. Buildings we've been told were designed for grandeur or intimidation. Buildings that suddenly make sense when you place a 9F tall human being in the frame. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I started measuring doorways in government buildings from the 1700s and 1800s. 12 to Dido, 15 feet high. Not at the entrance, inside, in working corridors where grandeur serves no purpose. Staircases with risers so tall, a normal person must stretch to climb them comfortably. Furniture, desks, chairs, beds found in estate sales and museums, all slightly too large, all dismissed as decorative or custom-made for tall individuals. But it's not just one building, it's thousands. Courthouses across America, administrative buildings throughout Europe, government complexes in Russia, India, South America, all built in the same period, all featuring the same oversized proportions, all supposedly designed this way for aesthetic reasons, despite the obvious impracticality, despite the added cost, despite the fact that it makes no functional sense unless the people using them weren't average-sized. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. In St. Petersburg, administrative buildings from the 1700s have 12-feet doors in back hallways. In Buenos Aires, municipal structures feature staircases requiring enormous strides. In Delhi, colonial-era government buildings, supposedly built by and for British administrators, contained furniture at scales that would make a 6-foot man feel like a child. These weren't ceremonial spaces. These were working buildings. Offices, administrative centers, the everyday architecture of governance and oversight. Who were they built for? And that's where Tartaria becomes impossible to ignore. If you're not familiar, Tartaria appears on maps from the 1700s and early 1800s as a vast territory spanning northern Asia. Not a legend, not a myth. An actual labeled region appearing in encyclopedias, atlases, and historical records with the casual certainty of France or Spain. Then sometime in the mid-1800s, it vanishes. Not conquered, not renamed, erased. The maps are redrawn, though encyclopedias omitted. The history books pretend it never existed. But the architecture remains. Massive stone structures across Central Asia, Russia, Mongolia. Buildings of impossible scale and precision. Doorways sized for giants. Halls that echo with vastness. All supposedly built by various empires or local craftsmen, with no documentation, no verified construction records, no explanation for how they achieved such engineering feats with the technology supposedly available. What if the giants weren't anomalies? What if they were the administrators, the overseers, the guardian class of a civilization we've been taught to forget? What if Tartaria, whatever it actually was, employed these individuals not as curiosities, but as functional members of society, and the architecture reflects that reality? It would explain the photographs, why they're always formal, official, showing these individuals in positions of authority, why they disappear after the 1,890 seconds, right when the last references to Tartaria vanish from official records, why the buildings remain but the occupants have been written out of history. This raises a simple but critical question. If you wanted to erase a civilization from collective memory, wouldn't you start by erasing the most visible evidence? The individuals whose very existence proves something else was here. The photographic record isn't the only evidence. Throughout the 1800s and early 1900s, newspapers across America regularly reported discoveries of giant human skeletons. Not scattered anomalies, systematic findings. The New York Times, 1,885, 7-foot skeleton, discovered in Michigan Mound. The San Diego Union, 1,895, bones of extraordinary size, found during railroad excavation. The Middletown Signal, 1,899, giant human remains, uncovered in Ohio. These weren't tabloid sensations. These were mainstream newspapers reporting what was, at the time, considered newsworthy but not particularly controversial. The accounts describe skeletons measuring 7 to 12 feet in length, often found in organized burial sites, frequently accompanied by artifacts suggesting advanced metallurgy and construction knowledge. Then something changed. After approximately 1920, these reports stopped, not gradually. Abruptly, discoveries that were once front-page news simply ceased to appear. The skeletons already found, many were sent to the Smithsonian Institution for further study. The Smithsonian now claims no such skeletons exist in their collections. Missing, lost, misplaced. During routine transfers, hundreds of specimens all vanished without proper documentation. The pattern is too consistent to ignore. Discoveries peak in the late 1800s. The same period, the giant photographs appear. The same period, Tartaria disappears from maps. Then, everything stops. The photographs stop. The newspaper reports stop. The maps change. The encyclopedias rewrite themselves, as if someone decided certain questions were no longer acceptable to ask. Why would you bury evidence of human biological diversity? Why would you systematically remove physical proof that challenges the standard narrative of human history? Unless that proof suggested something larger, something organized, something that implied a different structure to recent civilization than we've been taught. Let me propose something that sounds absurd until you examine the evidence. What if the giants weren't rulers? What if they were a specialized class? Guardians, overseers, administrators of infrastructure and construction. What if their size was functional, not ceremonial? What if buildings were scaled to them because they were the ones overseeing their construction and maintenance? It would explain the architectural patterns. Why government buildings, courthouses, administrative centers, structures of oversight and control feature oversized proportions, while residential areas remain human-scaled. Why the photographs show giants in formal, official contexts rather than domestic settings. Why historical records mention them in roles of supervision and authority, but rarely as merchants, artists, or common laborers. It would explain the construction mystery. How were massive stone structures built with such precision in the 1700s and 1800s? Maybe they weren't built by the civilizations we credit them to. Maybe they were built for those civilizations by a previous society that employed individuals physically capable of moving stones, operating machinery, and overseeing construction at scales we consider impossible. And it would explain the systematic erasure. If you're inheriting structures you didn't build, inheriting technology you don't fully understand, inheriting architectural systems designed for a different type of human being, what do? You adapt the narrative. You claim it as your own. You rewrite the construction dates, backdate the architects, and remove any evidence that suggests someone else was here first. Ask yourself, how many mysterious construction techniques suddenly make sense if you assume the builders were physically larger and stronger than modern humans? How many impossible engineering feats become merely difficult if the laborers stood 9 feet tall? The evidence suggests something much larger than random genetic anomalies. What disturbs me most isn't the evidence itself. It's the coordinated silence surrounding it. Academic institutions don't debate the giant skeletons. They pretend they never existed. Museums don't display the photographs. They file them in archives marked miscellaneous or unverified. Historical societies don't investigate the architectural proportions. They dismiss them as artistic choice. The pattern repeats across disciplines, across countries, across centuries of scholarship. It's not active suppression, it's passive erasure. Questions that simply aren't asked. Evidence that isn't examined. Dots that aren't connected because connecting them leads to conclusions that don't fit the established narrative. And when you point it out, when you lay the evidence side by side, the photographs, the architecture, the newspaper reports, the missing records, you're met with the same response. Interesting, but not significant. As if coincidence explains everything, as if patterns don't matter, as if asking why is somehow inappropriate. But the why is the entire point. Why did humans of extraordinary size exist in sufficient numbers to be regularly photographed and regularly discovered in burial sites? Why were they documented, then forgotten? Why does architecture from a specific period accommodate their proportions? Why do these elements cluster in the same geographical regions and time periods as Tartaria's disappearance from cartographic record? And why, when you mention any of this in academic circles, does the conversation immediately shut down? I keep returning to the photographs. These weren't monsters, weren't myths. They were people. Individuals with faces, clothing, families. People who stood for formal portraits like anyone else in the 1800s. People whose existence was so unremarkable at the time that photographers saw no need to explain or contextualize their presence. But we've made them remarkable by erasing them. We've made them impossible by denying they were ever possible. We've turned documented reality into forbidden speculation. And in doing so, we've lost something. Not just knowledge of who they were, but understanding of what we are, what we've forgotten, what we've inherited without comprehension. The massive doorways remain. The oversized staircases still stand. The buildings that make no sense for human proportions continue to serve modern functions. Their original purpose obscured by centuries of adaptive reuse. We walk through them daily without asking why. We accept the official explanations without examining whether they actually explain anything, because examining them requires accepting that history isn't a straight line of progress, that we might be living in the remnants of something more sophisticated. The photographs preserve what the buildings remember. Encyclopedias erased. The evidence persists, waiting for someone willing to ask the questions everyone else has agreed not to ask. Who were the giants? Why did they disappear? And what else vanished with them that we're still pretending was never here at all?